Hey, in this video, I'm gonna review 3 food ingredients you must avoid to burn fat. When I talk to people who are struggling to lose weight, they're almost always eating these food ingredients. And in this video, I'm gonna tell you what those ingredients are. I'm gonna tell you the foods you're gonna find them in, and I'm also gonna go over what you should eat, and I'm also gonna answer your questions at the end of this video. So let's break it down. Here are the 3 key food ingredients. Number 1 is processed seed oils. This is going to be things like corn oil, soybean, safflower, cottonseed, peanut oil, canola oil. These things are in so many different processed foods and a lot of foods that are marketed as healthy, particularly if you were to go and look at condiments. You take a salad dressing, for example. Oftentimes you're going to see something like soybean oil. Even if it's organic, it's still a processed seed oil that's high in something called linoleic acid. Now, linoleic acid is actually an essential fat. It's an omega-6 fatty acid, but we only need a small amount of it. And the problem with linoleic acid is that it has a 680-day half-life. That's literally a 2-year half-life. So once it gets into our body and gets into the cell membrane, it will literally sit there for 2 years. And it increases inflammation and oxidative stress. And the issue is that these high omega-6 seed oils, they can become oxidized really easily by heat, by air or oxygen in general, and also by pressure. And that's what's happening when we make a processed food and we put these seed oils in. We're using heat, we're using oxygen, and we're using pressure to kind of try to create a longer shelf life on a product. But that ends up oxidizing the linoleic acid, oxidizing these seed oils, and they form oxidative linoleic acid metabolites. One of the most dangerous that's well studied is called 4-HNE, which disrupts our DNA and disrupts our mitochondrial DNA. Literally, seed oils are poison to your mitochondria. Remember, the mitochondria are what burn fat for fuel. So when we poison and damage the mitochondria, we activate inflammation. And then what happens is the mitochondria are not able to use they're not able to use fat as a fuel source. So they're literally dependent upon burning sugar, something called glycolysis, which drives up even more oxidative stress and inflammation. So within the mitochondria, we have a phospholipid called cardiolipin. And cardiolipin can become saturated with these omega-6 linoleic acid molecules. And when that happens, that drives up more oxidative stress in that mitochondria. And that attracts different white blood cells and different cytokines, these immune agents that drive inflammation in that area. And one of the big issues with linoleic acid is that we've had such a huge increase in our consumption of it. In fact, between 1959 to 2008, researchers did a study, 50-year study. They looked at the fat samples from people in 1959, compared it to fat samples of people in 2008, and they found that the fat tissue, the adipose tissue, increased its level of linoleic acid by 136%. And this is thought to be one of the main reasons why we have such a big increase in insulin resistance. And insulin resistance is really the backbone. That's the main driver of obesity and people being overweight and not being able to burn fat for fuel. And again, insulin resistance is actually just a symptom of poor mitochondrial function. So seed oils are poisoning our mitochondria. The mitochondria now can't burn fat for fuel. So ultimately insulin goes up because we're trying to get sugar, glucose, we're trying to get compounds into the cell, right? And we end up with insulin resistance. So seed oils are the first thing we've got to make sure we're avoiding if we're going to burn fat for fuel. Number 2 is going to be any sort of processed carbohydrate, so any sort of processed sugar or starch, literally anything with sugar, but also high fructose corn syrup. So if you see sugar as one of the main ingredients, you see things like high fructose corn syrup, we want to avoid those because they're highly insulogenic. So they cause large increases in insulin, and insulin will then cause basically our body's inability to burn fat, right? So the higher your insulin, the more you're not going to be able to burn fat. You get stuck in sugar burning mode. The only way we burn fat is by bringing insulin down below a certain threshold, and then that allows our body now to burn fat for fuel. You got to think about insulin kind of like the brakes on your fat burning machine. So your body wants to burn fat for fuel, But insulin has to be low enough to take the foot off the brakes so we can burn fat for fuel. And that's a big issue. So any sort of processed sugar or starch is going to drive up insulin. And one of the big issues with starch is when it's cooked, it will become high in something called acrylamide. And acrylamide is basically a really, really potent inflammatory agent. We find it in potato chips, French fries, biscuits. It's basically cooked starch. It causes this toxic compound acrylamide. We want to reduce our exposure to that. So the more we can avoid these kind of baked goods, these sort of processed starches, as well as processed sugars, the better off we are. Where are we going to get carbs? Are all carbs bad? No, not all carbs are bad. I recommend getting carbs from fresh fruit and vegetables. Again, the higher heat that we cook any sort of carbohydrate with, the more acrylamide is going to form. And so I recommend, as much raw or lightly cooked, lightly steamed maybe, fruits and colorful vegetables, right? And that's what we're looking to do. And so the third big ingredient is chemicals. And there are so many in our foods. One of the main are preservatives, things like sodium benzoate, which we find in a lot of acidic foods, salad dressings, carbonated drinks, pickles. Sodium benzoate, you're gonna find that in, Mountain Dew, for example, has sodium benzoate in. Now, Mountain Dew, of course, tons of processed sugar in there, tons of chemicals and toxins, not something we want, but you're gonna find sodium benzoate oftentimes in things like pickles, right? Different types of, canned goods and even goods in glasses. It helps preserve their shelf life. There's also preservatives like sodium nitrate. We find that in a lot of processed meats. You wanna make sure if you're getting some sort of processed meat like turkey breast or something like that, you wanna make sure that it's nitrate free. It doesn't have that sodium nitrate. Another preservative is BHT. We find that in cereals, a lot of boxed goods. There's artificial sweeteners, things like aspartame, aspartame, potassium, Splenda. You may have heard of those. We want to avoid those. Those are all chemicals that damage aspartame is neurotoxic, actually damages our neurons. And then Splenda is got chlorine, it's got a chlorine base, and that damages our natural gut microflora. So we definitely want to avoid that. Artificial colors, flavor enhancers, pesticides, and herbicides. The more we can avoid that, the better off we are. Now, am I saying we need to 100% avoid these things? No, I think in our society today, it's pretty much impossible to 100% avoid chemicals, linoleic acid or seed oils, and any sort of processed sugar. It's gonna be really, really hard for you to avoid that altogether 100%. However, the more you can reduce your exposure to those things, the better off you are. And what should you be eating instead? Well, number one is grass-fed animal products, particularly your ruminant animals, things like grass-fed beef or lamb or bison. Grass-fed beef, lamb, and bison are really rich in compounds that help protect your mitochondria, things like carnitine and carnosine. Carnosine actually is really important for protecting against the damage caused by oxidative linoleic acid metabolites. We talked about that earlier, how they damage the mitochondria. One of the best things to protect it again is gonna be carnosine, as well as something called fatty 15, right? Fatty 15 is a 15 carbon fatty acid. Its name is pentadecanoic acid. And that is found in your grass-fed animal products, particularly grass-fed dairy, things like grass-fed butter, really rich in this fatty 15, which helps translocate linoleic acid out of the mitochondrial membrane and out of the cell membrane, right? So it actually helps remove that faster. We talked about how there's a 680-day, like a literally 2-year lifespan for linoleic acid in the body. We need to move that out. And so things that protect your cells are carnosine, which we find in high amounts in our grass-fed beef, our grass-fed bison, lamb, and as well as the fatty 15, the 15 carbon fatty acid saturated fat, which we find in grass-fed dairy. So make sure you're prioritizing grass-fed animal products. Also, wild-caught seafood is really good, particularly wild-caught sockeye salmon. That is really good. Alaskan salmon. It's rich in high-quality, long-chain omega-3 fatty acids, as well as something called astaxanthin, which is one of the most powerful antioxidants to protect your cell membranes. It's actually like a natural sunscreen, protects radiation damage from UV light, A lot of amazing benefits from astaxanthin. I mean, think about a salmon. It's one of the only species on the planet that can swim upstream against the rapids and literally jump up to 12 feet out of the water. That's incredible. That's amazing mitochondrial energy production. And when we take on some of those benefits by consuming that, we're taking on the astaxanthin. That's going to give us stronger, healthier, more stress-resilient mitochondria, better fat-burning mitochondria. So consuming wild-caught seafood is really helpful. Pasture-raised eggs, if you get poultry, do your best to try to get organic. Organic means more nutrients, less toxins, particularly less pesticides and herbicides, different chemicals. But in general, there's also going to be more nutrients because the diet, the food that the animal is eating is better. Like with grass-fed cows, they're consuming grass and greens, right? And you want to make sure it's 100% grass-fed. That is going to be leaner, okay? Less omega-6 fats, but also on top of that, more conjugate and linoleic acid, which drives your metabolism, drives fat burning, more carnosine in there, like we talked about, more fat-soluble nutrients like vitamin A that are so important for brain health, nervous system health. So we want to make sure we're getting grass-fed as much as possible. We also want healthy fats, things like high polyphenol, extra virgin olive oil, avocados. We talked about grass-fed dairy, like for example, grass-fed butter, how that's rich in fatty 15, but it's also rich in other fat-soluble nutrients and things like choline and phospholipids for healthy brain function. So getting good healthy fats in is important, as well as herbs. I like things like basil, oregano, ginger, thyme, sage, right? These kind of Mediterranean-based herbs, so good for, they're called carminatives because they're really good for your gut. They help move things through your gut. They help reduce gas, bloating. They help improve nutrient absorption and reduce toxins that are created in your gut. So getting good herbs on your food makes them taste better, smell better, and supports your digestive system and your immune system as well, right? You can also do things like dandelion, for example, which is great for liver, milk thistle, amazing for liver health, right? So there's all different types of herbs. You can do herbal teas, green tea, ginger tea, dandelion tea, right? There's herbal tea blends, things like nighty-night tea, stuff like that, that can be really helpful. For example, nighty-night tea would be great for sleep. There's teas that are really good for detox. So good things to use. I also recommend apple cider vinegar. Take a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar in 4 to 6 ounces of water before your meals, and that will activate your vagus nerve, which helps your body produce stomach acid, digestive enzymes, bile, so you can digest and metabolize your food more effectively. The better you digest your food, the less inflammation you're gonna have in your body. Apple cider vinegar will help with that. There's also something called acetic acid in apple cider vinegar. That acetic acid is like a mitochondrial super fuel, and it enhances mitochondrial function. This is one of the reasons why people get such amazing benefits of apple cider vinegar, consuming it for reducing their blood sugar, stabilizing and improving insulin sensitivity, as well as reducing overall inflammation, improving their blood pressure, fat burning, so many great benefits. So use apple cider vinegar. It's as simple as this: 1 tablespoon, 4 to 6 ounces of water, let's say 10, 15 minutes before your meal. That will get your body primed for digesting that food and get you the great benefits of acetic acid. I'm also a big fan of coffee if you're able to tolerate it well. It's ideally you're getting a mold-free coffee. Unfortunately, most coffee that's on the market is full of mold and mycotoxins and is highly sprayed with pesticides and herbicides. So you want to get an organic coffee that's certified to be mold or mycotoxin free, okay? And that can be really, really helpful. And there's also something called shade grown, and that means that it's lower acid. It's usually easier on your digestive system, doesn't cause reflux and things like that. One of my favorite brands is called Life Boost Coffee. That's what I drink on a regular basis. And it's great. And coffee is rich in chlorogenic acid and caffeic acid. And these two acids are amazing, again, for the mitochondria. They help drive mitochondrial function. So the more efficient your mitochondria are, the better you're gonna burn fat for fuel. So coffee will actually activate something called the AMPK pathway in your cells that will help you use fat as a great fuel source, help drive more fatty acid burning in your mitochondria. So consuming coffee can be really helpful. Obviously, you don't wanna overdo it on caffeine. You wanna do it, you should feel great when you're drinking coffee. If you don't, okay, you may need more magnesium, you may need more electrolytes, or you may just be part of the, an individual that just doesn't do great with coffee, or it may be a bad coffee, right? So those are good things to look into, okay? And if you're drinking coffee or not, you should always be focusing on good hydration. You want things moving through your body like a river, not being stagnant like a pond. So hydrating your body helps you pee and poop your way to good health, and that's really key. You gotta be moving toxins out of your system on a regular basis. So drink good, well-filtered water. I recommend a reverse osmosis water system or a distilled water system at your house, so you can be mostly drinking from glass rather than plastic, okay? If you're drinking, bottled water all the time in plastic, you're getting these microplastics, as well as estrogen mimicking compounds like BPA and parabens and phthalates that throw off your hormones. These are xenoestrogens, and they're really problematic. So you wanna make sure you're drinking out of glass. And last but not least, have an attitude of gratitude, right? And so don't think about what foods you can't eat now that you know the 3 food ingredients that cause you to not be able to burn fat. Instead, have an attitude of gratitude that you can eat real God-given foods, right? Natural foods from nature, that you can enjoy an amazing steak, that you can enjoy a great apple or orange or pear or peach, or a bowl of strawberries, right? That you can have an amazing protein shake with coconut milk or raw grass-fed milk or something along those lines. That you can have this amazing arugula-based salad with maybe some diced up tomatoes, some black olives on it or green olives, some onions on there with extra virgin olive oil, lemon juice, some herbs on it, and maybe some grilled chicken on there, right? For good protein. Now start thinking about how you can enjoy those great meals, and you can enjoy better health, better energy, better mental clarity, better fat burning, so you can be the person that God designed you to be. Hopefully you got a lot out of this video. Please share it with somebody that you know and that you care about, and we'll see you soon. Be blessed.